This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
It sounds like one of the names they would have for a monarch. It's like Queen Javia the First, Black Radical Queer, among queer Negro women.
All the way from the A, you listen to my favorite lesbian on BRQ.
Hey, stay locked in with your favorite lesbian on Black Radical Queer. Yeah.
Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole, aka your favorite lesbian, and you're listening to Black Radical Queer Podcast, our stories on our own terms.
Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole. Welcome back to another episode of Black Radical Queer Podcast. As usual, I am going to allow my guests to introduce themselves, and then we will get into our conversation. Before they introduce themselves, though, I am really excited to have this guest on because, I'll let her tell you how she came across me, but I am really excited to have her on because she's a prime example of why I do this and like what's the most fulfilling thing for me in doing this anyway. So y'all get to know her. I'm gonna be quiet.
Yeah, awesome. So my name is Marissa Watts. I'm a 21-year-old student. I go to the college University at Albany. And I actually found this podcast kind of just looking through like the iTunes podcast. I typed in queer, and then this podcast actually came up. And I've been listening literally probably for like 3 weeks. I've gotten through almost all of the episodes, which is super funny. I listen to this podcast literally when I tell you I'm walking from class to class. I listen to it, in my spare time when I kind of feel like I need someone to, relate to, and someone that understands and shares the same or similar issues, as me. And yeah, so I'm honestly so excited. I'm feeling super blessed to be on this podcast. It's like really surreal for me. But yeah, like I said, my name's Marissa. I'm a student. My pronouns are she, she's, and hers. And I do identify as queer. And we'll talk a lot more about that, I'm sure.
All right. So, like I said, I am excited to have Marissa on the show. So how we came across each other, because some people who are my listeners, when I say this, they're going to know who I'm talking about because I mentioned you. I spoke about you to some people that were close to me. So like my wife, my best friend, and stuff like that. I was like, look, y'all, I got to tell y'all about this. So I got a message on Instagram from Marissa, and she was just saying, I listened to the podcast and that type of stuff. And I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, oh snap, like somebody, reached out to me. It was really exciting to get the feedback, and, we had our Instagram conversation and our Aries connection,
Okay.
Gang. So, but yeah, so we're talking about that, got the fire sign stuff going on. Birthdays are close, so I'm already biased. So once I start with the Aries, I'm like, I'm already biased. I'm already a fan. But so it meant a lot to me that the show is something that she can relate to, and so I really wanted for my listeners, for you all, to be able to get a chance to get to know her and for her to share her story, because that's when I talk about BRQ, and I know I have like the little tagline that's like our stories on our own terms, but it's not just like a catchphrase or anything like that. It's something I really, really mean. I want for us to be able to be the narrators of our own stories and be subjects and not objects. And so this is the platform for that. So when Marissa reached out and just told me that, she enjoyed the podcast and stuff like that, I asked her if she would be open to coming on, because I think that, her story is really a prime example of what BRQ is about. So we have some things in common outside of just the Aries connection, but I'm going to, give her that space to kind of tell you all about herself, what she does, and just, her story, and we'll just like have our conversation and allow y'all to be nosy.
Yeah. Well, to start, thank you. I'm super excited to be here. My story, honestly, is very much unlike many people that I've met, specifically people, you know, in the queer community at UAlbany. And by that, I mean I am 21 years old and have always known that, basically, I've always known that I've had interest in both men and women, but I've been kind of trying to figure out, you know, where I stand in labeling and trying to kind of come to terms with the fact that I also like people of the same sex as me. And I've been doing that throughout my life in certain aspects, but have always really conformed to the idea that, you know, society normalizes, which is, you know, men and women are people that should be the ones getting together, which is really unfortunate because I feel like at this point in my life now I'm really starting to understand that, you know, my feelings are real towards women. My feelings are definitely valid, but now I'm finally starting to involve myself, you know, in a community that so far has opened their arms to me. But I feel like my experience is different just because a lot of people grow up knowing in some sense. And I have always known but not accepted and not really branched out and began to really like understand and realize, because I've always just been so subjected to the understanding that being with someone of the same sex is normal. So that's where I'm kind of coming from in my identification of queer, and that's just a new realization also. And we can kind of talk about that too later in the podcast. Like, why does the word queer mean something to me, and how do I resonate with that word over the other words that, you know, are in the community that we represent. But yeah, like I said, I'm a college student. I walk around kind of trying to understand, you know, myself, and I just recently put the LGBTQ flag in my Instagram bio. And as someone that's known on college campuses, or on this college campus at least, I wonder if people have a different view of me in the sense of, like, me being straight passing and people always knowing that I've loved males but not really knowing the other side of me, who also loves women, you know, which was behind closed doors. So now that's just a big difficulty that I guess I'm struggling with.
Like, has anyone said anything to you since you made that change in your bio?
Yeah, people really, like, even close friends of mine, I just recently got a text like, hey, just wondering, but you like girls too? Like, what's up with your Instagram bio and things like that? And I do understand to some extent, like, their curiosity, but I feel like it's not people's business. And he did end up apologizing after, because he didn't really come at it in a sensitive way, more in like I want to know male egotistical way, or which was frustrating, like, and I don't feel like if I don't feel comfortable to say it to you and come out and say it, I don't need to answer to you, you know. So I've just been getting a lot of stuff like that.
No, because I feel like that says a lot. You know, if I come to you and I share something with you, then fine. But something that's very common, especially when you're different in some kind of way, particularly if you're like LGBTQ, people feel like if they see certain things, that automatically gives them a certain type of access to you, and that's just not the case. So, for instance, just because just because I'm out, or even if I post, like, in my bio, I put your favorite lesbian because it's like my little joke or whatever, or I used to say, like, your friendly neighborhood lesbian. Just because I put that does not mean that it's open season for you to ask me questions about my sexuality, right? But people make that assumption because they feel like, oh, well, either I saw this, you know, in your bio, or I see you holding hands with someone of the same sex or something like that, and they feel like, oh, I see this, so I have this access to have all this information about you. It's really like a sense of entitlement that people have toward, like, knowing your personal things. You are allowed to, like, express who you are in different ways, and that still doesn't mean that there's this automatic access to you, you know, to knowing your business, basically. So that's something that really I think too, it puts pressure on folks to feel like they have to come out a certain way, like being out means a certain thing, because they're like, oh, well, that means I have to like answer all these questions or just be open, you know, to whatever. And it's like, no, you don't have to be. You know, it's totally up to you. You're the authority on how you want, you know, how out you want to be and that type of stuff. So.
Yeah, and I feel like that's really, really difficult for me. And I feel like definitely like the intersection of like being Black in like a world where white is normative and like being queer in a world where straight is considered normative as well. Like, I feel like there's been so many times that I have to fend for, you know, specifically my whole race, because, like I said, I haven't had too many issues being queer because I haven't been open with saying I'm queer. But you can see my Blackness from my skin. So in a white world, in a private, you know, university, even a public university, I did transfer from a private one to a public one, which is a little more diverse, but there's still those white folks and those people that aren't Black and haven't experienced, you know, being in a Black body, and that still ask me questions that make me feel like I have to fend for my race. And now it seems to be the same with, you know, my sexuality, which is, it's just really unfortunate. And, you know, I don't want to be the spokesperson for all of these things that you may never understand, but it's like I also have to find the strength and the understanding within myself to inform people and make people knowledgeable, because I feel like that also is my civic duty. So it's like, where do you kind of find the balance between those two aspects of who you are, which is difficult?
I mean, it's a tough spot to be in. I mean, I think that when you said, you know, I don't want to be the spokesperson, it's like I was kind of doing like the amen thing, because in previous episodes I've, you know, mentioned to my listeners, you know, I've gotten to a place where I am tired of coming out. I don't want to have to be, there's certain things I don't want to have to do. And it is about striking balance. I do feel like when you're a marginalized person, like when you're Black, queer, woman, like, you know, just marginalized all across the board, there's this expectation. It's similar to when you were talking about someone asking you the question and it's like, well, okay, you know, you kind of came at me sideways. It's that assumption of access, or like that entitlement to have the access. It's the same thing with education. Like, people just feel like, oh, well, you're supposed to teach and you're supposed to, and I used to feel that way when I was younger. And the older I get, the less I feel that way, particularly in relation to white people. I have a little more patience for like people of color and a little more patience for Black people, but I am tired of like always having to be in a role. So it's really like picking and choosing, prioritizing when to play that role and when not to, for your own well-being, because it may be beneficial in certain circumstances. So really just looking at when do I want to be in this place to have to educate people and stuff, and when do I want to step back and just focus on myself? It's a really tough spot to be in, especially because with so much entitlement, people expect you to do it, which is one thing if I just choose to do it, but it's another thing when you assume that I'm just going to, you know, give you all the answers. I'm like the go-to person for Black folks and queer folks and stuff. It's a lot, and you just want to live your life too. You don't want your life to revolve around, you know, constantly defending who you are. So it really is a balancing act. I used to do a lot more defending and teaching and education and stuff like that when I was younger, and it honestly got old. I got tired of it, and it got old, and then I started to get angry and all kind of stuff, and so I just don't do it, especially because there's so much access to things now. I don't feel like that weight should be on you or me or like on any one person to be that authority. Like, go do some damn research. Go do put forth some effort instead of having the expectation that we have to put forth that mental and emotional, intellectual labor. It's not fair to you because you're a person living your life, you know. So some folks got to take some shit into their own hands and learn and do the work and not expect you to do that labor, especially when you're just trying to, figure some things out for yourself and just, grow into your identity and just enjoy your life.
Mhm. Yeah, and like you mentioned something that was so big, like it's tiring. It's tiring with self-care, with me trying to really like do my best with myself, and now I'm having to do my best with myself, but also explain to you why, my best is good enough, because even though I'm maybe different than you, like, you get what I'm saying? So that's just something that I've been having a really hard time dealing with. But I also want people to understand that I'm me in my truest form. And me in my truest form also is my queerness. And so I think my biggest thing with that is when you have people close to you, you want them to know about you, and you want them to understand, where you're coming from, where your point of view lies. And I feel like that has to do with my queerness as well as my blackness, as well as me identifying as a woman. It all intersects. And it shapes my everyday experience. So with people close to me or people I have in my circle, I do want them to know that part of me. But then again, it's draining. Like, it's draining having to explain this to people.
Yeah.
So where do you find a balance with that as well?
I think it's constantly, it's a process. Like, it's something that, I wish I could say that I had it figured out, but I'm constantly in the process of figuring it out, because it's human nature to want to be understood. And so in order to be like understood, you want people to know, I was just talking about this recently, but people knowing like the fullness of you, like not just one compartment, and we're very, especially women of color, especially Black women, we are taught to be very compartmentalized. So that's how we're kind of taught to navigate the world. It's just kind of like, only be this, like you are just a mother in this situation, you're just the wife, you're just, and so that is very limiting, so it's something that we're like constantly working to unpack. So I wonder, like, if that is part of, because you said that really in terms of you like learning more about your identity and embracing certain things, this is like a newer thing. And in the past, when you were younger, you were saying something that made your experience different was that, it wasn't something that you really wanted to acknowledge. So like, what was that process like? Because when did you like kind of start to figure that out, and did you just like reject it and deny it? So when did you transition, from that to like, embracing this as a part of you?
Yeah, I definitely think when I really knew, was actually at my old school, where there was a girl that I was interested in who was very interested in me, and it felt exactly the same, if not better in some cases, when it came to not even like physically, but emotional intimacy and understanding, which I haven't ever felt from a male, just because, obviously we live in two different, literally universes when it comes to like oppression and things like
your
that.
Experiences.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I just realized it really felt the same. And then I kind of looked back and did a check on my childhood and really began to understand that and remember the moments where I just knew that I loved people for who they are. I always tell a story about how this is me in like kindergarten, mind you, and there was a teacher who I was so emotionally moved by because of her way with words, the way she made me feel safe and understood. And that was in a time that I didn't even know you could feel for anyone that way, but not even in a way, like relationship way. Obviously this is like a grown woman, but just those feelings of connection, I kind of looked back into my psyche and into my memory and realized that I had those with women primarily. But, throughout my childhood, I've always seen the like heteronormative way of life. I've always grown up with my two parents. They've always, dated people that were of opposite sex, and I've always just seen that and grown up to think that that was the right way to live. Come to find out, that's it's not. It's completely not. It's completely not. And so definitely that experience with the woman from my old school and understanding that my feelings are valid and kind of, stop running from them because they're real and they're full force and they're okay. So that's kind of
and
where
I think another thing to keep in mind is like they're normal. Like, even though that's not what's normalized, like, not to, it's kind of one of those things where it's not unique. Like it's in a good way. It's like, hey, you're not the only person that feel this way. Like you're not alone in the feelings that you have. Other people experience this too, and so your feelings are valid. They're shared, and they're like a norm. It's normal. It's not like weird or crazy or abnormal for you to feel those things.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of led me to my journey and where I am now. And I'm not currently like with anyone, but I feel like I could definitely love to any capacity. And I kind of wanted to speak about the reason I identify with queer, because I've always had this thought that, people love people, and that's just, I've always thought it, but I never really accepted it. And the queer kind of comes from just the way that society understands different aspects of like the LGBTQI plus community. I feel like certain things are almost too labeling, and queer is more of like the umbrella term where people know you're a part of the community, but they don't necessarily have the capacity to judge, which I guess comes from my fear of being judged, which is also clearly, since I'm just now coming out and just now learning to accept me liking who I like for who they are exactly in their entirety. So I just don't want people to know, and that's completely okay too. Like I definitely want to stress, you don't have to come out and tell people, like you don't have to let other people know what's going on in your life. Like that's something that you do when you're absolutely ready. So even this is really a big step for me to be on this show and kind of talk about my queerness and confirm the things that, people have been speaking about, but not only for them, because I'm sick of answering questions, so I'm just going to direct them to this podcast, to be honest, but for myself, and right, but having these words come out of my mouth and know that they have meaning and know that I'm speaking my truth in the way I'm living, the way I'm, talking about these subjects. It's just confirmation for me, but I definitely want to stress you don't have to tell people and you don't have to rush the process. Just do what you feel is right. And I knew those feelings felt right when I was young, when I was with the girl at my old school, and just kind of run with it. Even before you identify, like, figure out what you like, figure out what you don't, try new things. Dive into the concept that you may not be who everyone else thinks you are, and that's super okay. So that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now.
I think that's the thing that people need to keep in mind. I try to stress that, I hate the whole, like kind of almost like this concept, or just like the construct is, I guess, a better word, of coming out, and how, if you are other in some kind of way, you feel like, oh, this is a mandatory part of my journey, that I come out, that I proclaim from the mountaintop, and, that I, like, it's an obligation. And so I challenge that, because I don't feel like it's an obligation. I feel like we really have autonomy and agency to tell if and when we want to. And so when I was younger, I really felt the need to, like, be a little more flamboyant. When I say younger, I mean like 14, 15, 16, because I came out at like 14 years old. So, and because there was so much backlash and so much stuff I dealt with, I rebelled against that by just being even more ridiculous. Like, I wore so much rainbow stuff, and like, I was just like, forget what what you got to say or how you feel. I just was like bucking against everything that was coming at me. So, but that got tiring and draining. And by the time I finished high school, that was shut down. I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. I don't have to do that. And now that I'm, exactly 10 years older than you, which is crazy to me to say, but oh Lord. But yeah, it's I just see like where you are now, and I think the most important part about like this whole process is that you're getting to know yourself so much better, and you're like acknowledging things to yourself, because to me that's been like in my journey kind of one of the most profound things. I was able to unpack some stuff. I was able to admit some things to myself and not feel like shame or not feel like I had to like deny it and be a certain type of way. I'm like, look, let me just be my full self with me. I feel like, kind of like you are the most important person that you have to quote unquote come out to. And then everybody else, whoever else you choose to share it with, it's really a privilege. Like, it's not an obligation. And so for those people who are close to you and who care about you, it's just another way for them to have a fuller understanding of you. But while also understanding that this is not an obligation, like you can choose to disclose what you want to disclose. You can choose to keep to yourself what you would like to. And if you're sharing it with someone, it's because you're choosing to, to let them know, and that it's, you have a certain type of relationship with them. So I think that people understanding that, the significance of it, as opposed to thinking it's automatic and they're entitled to an explanation and they should hit you up like, yeah, so tell me about, no. Like, that's not, you're not obligated to do that. Yeah, I'm so, like, even though I've come out multiple times, I'm, in a lot of ways, I'm kind of I feel like it should be on your own terms. I don't feel like anybody should be forced or like obligated to do it. So that's what really bothers me. But I think that because you've had time to like process for yourself, the biggest thing is like you accepting you, regardless of what other people say. It's like, okay, look, you can listen to this podcast and keep it pushing, but you coming to terms with who you are and being able to like acknowledge your full self is what kind of like the beautiful thing is.
Yeah, thank you. And a lot of the time, it's mostly about what are people's intentions behind asking. And I feel like most of the time you can definitely tell, are they asking for themselves? Are they coming from a place where they want to work with your experience and try to holistically understand you better? And that has, figuring that out has been really a challenge for me, because people put on a good front. But not only that, if you are able to see transparently through like why they're asking and it's negative, it's almost like do I want you in my life? Like, that's what I'm thinking about that boy that asked me about my sexuality, and he said it in a way that was like alarming. Why are you asking about me like that, and how do I navigate like the aftermath of it? But also, I feel like it's really difficult for me identifying as queer and liking both sexes, because a lot of the time men ask me for their own ego and for their own gain. And it's so disturbing. It's so disturbing to think that, my sexuality is being, like, it's not being taken serious, and it's a lot of the time thought of as something that I'm doing for other people, especially in college, where I'm around so many young-minded individuals that clearly don't have a grip on, life or the reality of it. But yeah, even I've had friends, like girlfriends, people that I'm close to, try to like kiss me, and I'm thinking that they're doing it in a friendly way.
My God.
I swear, like, and they do that in a friendly way. But I asked one time, I was like, why do you do that? Like, what makes you? Because I'm all for, like, I love my friends to the bottom of my heart. I don't mind. I mean, that if it's in a friendly way, which is how I look at them. But she goes, because I thought you would like it, Marissa. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, like, do you not understand that I'm not interested
That
in
is
you?
a hot mess.
That's
Oh my God.
it's a whole hot mess.
That's a hot, but that's but it's
Uh-huh.
entitlement, that's entitlement. Because people feel like that goes back to that assumption, like, thinking that, oh, because I know this about you, I have a certain type of access to you, which is a very, entitled way of thinking. And
Yeah.
I think I may have mentioned this on the show before, I can't remember, but when I came out, I remember, I had like some friends. I didn't have like a ton of friends, but I had some friends, and I came out and I was in high school, and I at the time was writing for this newspaper that went to like all of the high schools in Metro Atlanta, because that's where I'm from. So it went out, so people at my school saw it. So I came out in like I was already out to like my family, but this was like my coming out story in print that the whole school saw. So I went to lunch, and, I sat with my usual people. And this girl who was like, she was more so an acquaintance to me. She wasn't a close friend of mine, but she was like a friend of a friend. Like we and her shared a close friend. So when I sat down, she was like, oh, she said something to the effect of like, she tried to crack jokes about, don't try her, she's not into girls and all this type of stuff. And I was like, okay, like, you're not even my type, but, so I told her, I was like, don't worry, it's like you are safe. Like, don't you fret. It's okay.
I know.
And then she got offended. Then she got in her feelings like, oh, what does that mean? So it's that, it's like, okay, so you feel entitled, like you feel like I'm automatically going to be making some type of advance towards you or open to your advances, because I've had, I had girls who did some, not like kiss me, but once they found out, be very flirty with me and kind of like touchy-feely and assume that I was okay with that. And I'm like, no, like just because I like girls doesn't mean that I'm okay with you all of a sudden when you never interacted with me like this before. And now all of a sudden that you know this information about me, you feel like you have more access to me to be more touchy-feely, to be more in my face, to be very flirty, to do stuff that you just did not do before, which is very interesting to me, but also it's irritating, because then it starts to, for me, I felt like, not just like but I kind of felt like, okay, well, are you just kind of sort of like experimenting with me or toying with me? I don't know. It was a very weird place to be in. So I don't know. That's so crazy to me, because that's a boundary violation. Like, if you're just like, kissing, what? Like, what makes you think that's, I don't understand. I just can't.
And I don't know if that's like you Albany things, or if she just thinks I'm pretty and wanted to kiss me, or if she was doing that for male validation because men were around. I don't really know. I don't really know, and I guess that's an important question to ask. I kind of just like shoot it off a little, and I was like, no, like I don't like that. Like, I mean, it's not like I did, but like I'm not particularly intrigued with your kiss that, I like, if I like that. But so I guess my question to you, because after hearing your story, like, I can definitely resonate with some of those feelings of like feeling violated in some sense, or not feeling comfortable. But I'm just wondering, how do you feel like you can protect your queer body and still feel safe and say no and be stern in your answer and have people respect that, but not only that, but keep you safe?
I think that's a really, really good question. For me, because I think that, a lot of it does depend on kind of your situation in terms of like the safety part, but something that I found that has been applicable kind of across the board is I try to be very, very clear about my boundaries, And this is, it's something that took time because this was not, at 21, like, I mean, I feel like it's something that I mentioned to you, but I feel like you're kind of, in a lot of ways, further along in the process than a lot of people who are, doing this at 21. But at 21, I was not as strict about my boundaries as I was by the time I hit 23 or something. Like, it took, some time, but I communicated my boundaries. So, for instance, if I'm getting to know, whether I'm getting to know someone or if I already know them, I just let them know more so one-on-one. If I've already had some type of issue with them, then I'll let them know, okay, look, I want for you to, like, there's some things I want for you to understand about me. Like, yes, I do identify this way. That does not mean that I'm just kind of like down for whatever, whenever. Just like you have your attraction, that doesn't mean that it extends to everybody. Like, if you're attracted to men, that doesn't mean that you're attracted to every man and that you want every man to have access to you. That same thing applies to me. So I try to relate it to them, but it also depends on the person, kind of my interaction with them. Because some people you have to kind of be more firm with than others, and it depends on your history with the person. So for this person who suddenly became really touchy-feely with me, I called her out on it. So I was like, okay, so, I've known you for X amount of years. However, I think at that point it had been 4 years. I've known you for 4 years. And, over the time and this was something I also did one-on-one. I didn't really do in front of, but now I don't always do it one-on-one, but with this particular person, I did it one-on-one based on her interaction with me. I was like, yeah, so I've noticed, like, lately you've been a lot more, like, affectionate towards me. You've been, like, a lot closer to me, like, physically closer, like, sitting closer to me, being a little more flirty and making little comments and stuff. And, over the time that I've known you, we haven't really interacted like that. So I was just curious what happened, what was the shift, because, it's not something that we've talked about. So I want to kind of see what changed. And so give her an opportunity to like respond to me and go from there. But, like, if it's something that I'm comfortable with, but I just want to know what her motivation is, then, move forward with that. But if I'm not comfortable with it, just saying, well, okay, I'm not, I'm fine with how our friendship was before. We don't have to, like, I'm not really comfortable with us, being all touchy-feely, stuff like that. That's not how our friendship is. I don't want it to suddenly become that way. So it depends on the person. I mean, I've had guys ask me very, very inappropriate questions, and I'll just tell them, I just want, like, if they say, like, oh, yeah, so, I mean, it's real inappropriate. Some things they'll ask very personal questions about, like, sex and all this type of stuff, and I'm just like, look, I'm not going to answer that. It's inappropriate. I don't ask you about, what you have going on. I don't ask you about your sex life. I don't want you to ask me about mine. My sexuality isn't for your entertainment. So I think being very clear about your boundaries and just kind of approaching it person by person, because I don't think there's really like a one size fits all, but your boundaries should be like something that's set. Like, your boundaries can be this set thing where okay, well, this is crossing the line with me, or this is, getting close. But how you communicate it to each person, based on your relationship with them. And for some people, you have to just kind of remove yourself. Because I've had folks who I told them, okay, look, I don't want to talk about this. It's not appropriate. Don't ask me questions about my sex life with my girlfriend. Like, I'm not going to answer the questions. And if they like, oh, you're overreacting, or they still ask me the questions, then I just stopped hanging with them and stopped being around them. And I had to make the decision. People who I thought were my friends, who I thought would respect my identity and respect my boundaries, did not. And I had to cut them off.
Yeah, and, like, how do you do that, but also understand that, like, this is a learning experience for some people, and this isn't necessarily, since they don't experience it, they may not understand, but
right.
It may also be just society's understanding of what's normative, like we've talked about. Like, I have a lot of friends, even really close people, that slip up and use gay in terms that I don't necessarily, it doesn't even make sense. Like, they'll be like, oh, that's gay, or like, oh, pause, or like, that's some gay shit, bro. Like, like, those are all things that people, especially people in the Black community that tend to be very homophobic, often say, and these are people that I'm over here chilling with, and I'm like, wait, like, those are, like, I am a part of this community. Do you not realize? That also comes from being,
Right.
Straight passing, and when people look at me and my physicality and see me, they see someone that they would think is a straight woman.
Right, they see femme. If you're femme presenting, then they assume that also means straight. So there's a lot of like kind of invisibility that comes with that. I mean, it is people. So it's something that I like recently talked about. I do believe in a lot of cases of kind of giving people room to grow and expand their knowledge and stuff like that. It does not have to be at your expense. So if, let's say, you're hanging with this group of friends and, someone's like, oh, that's gay, or, no homo, or just little stuff like that, and you're like, okay. If you express like, okay, well, I get what you're saying, but I'm not comfortable with that because it's really, like, if you think about it, it really doesn't even make any sense. Like, why would that, what do you mean that's gay, And so if you have a conversation with them and they're not open to learning, it doesn't necessarily mean they will never be, but that still doesn't mean that you have to share space with them while they're going through the process. You're not obligated to be their teacher. So you can, that in that moment, they can choose to like learn from what it is that you're telling them. But if you feel like, hey, I had this conversation with you and there's no change, then I have to remove myself. That doesn't mean that it's forever. I have had people who, in the moment, I've had to be like, okay, let me take a step back from you, or 2 or 3 steps back from you, because I see that we're not on the same page and there's work you need to do. And there's only so much teaching and other type of stuff that I'm willing to do. So I will take a step back, but it doesn't have to be permanent. If that person comes back around and they're like, I apologize, or I recognize this, fine, we can kind of go from there. Or if I notice certain things, if I start to see them and I'm like, oh, I noticed that, their post, like their Facebook posts kind of changed and they're starting to, it seems like they're learning more stuff or whatever, then I can, kind of circle back to them. So it doesn't have to be, oh, I have to like let you go forever. But you also don't have to be like the sacrificial queer, basically, to be like, oh, well, let me, be the guinea pig for you to do all your learning. You don't have to do that either. Like, you're not, it doesn't have to be at your expense, because you still have your personhood, like, to consider. And that's a lot for you to be in that role of teaching and explaining this and explaining that. Only you can, you can decide for yourself, like, what that limit is. But once you get to that limit, just being like, okay, I'm not going to engage, and I can circle back to it. So it doesn't have to be, I'm not like a huge fan of quote unquote cancel culture. Like, I do believe that people can grow and learn. Like, we all have to come from somewhere. We all, are problematic in some kind of way. So I do feel like there's room for growth. It's up to certain things. I have my hard limits. Like, if you're a predator and you all that kind of stuff, no. But in terms of ignorance and you learning, you may grow and learn. I don't have to be there step by step throughout your whole, learning process. I can circle back to you when you're a little bit further along, when it's not, as risky for me, because there's still a safety thing too. There's unsafe things that can happen out of ignorance. So, to kind of keeping those things in mind.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense with boundaries, with being able to still speak your mind. And like, I would definitely identify, I've heard you speak a lot about like being radical. So it's like being passionate, being radical, but also not exhausting yourself, and being careful of, exceeding what you feel like you can do for people, or what you feel like you're comfortable to do for yourself, and
because that's also radical
for you. Yeah.
So it's like understanding that both sides of that is radical. So you being willing to teach and, be a resource and stuff like that, and the information that you provide and your lived experience being this like valid knowledge is radical, but it's also radical for you to prioritize yourself. Because you're a Black woman and a Black queer person and a Black queer woman, like, if you put yourself first in any situation, it's already radical, honestly, because we are not expected to put ourselves first, period. We're the people who are on the front lines and for everybody, doing the work for everybody, teaching everybody, nurturing everybody, like carrying everybody. So anytime you make that decision to put yourself first and to prioritize yourself, that is a radical decision. It doesn't have to be, being radical doesn't only have to just be you teaching and like trying to educate folks. It's like you choosing to not do that and just to be like, you know what, I'm going to put myself first and live my damn life, and be very, you know, like particular about who I choose to kind of give that type of energy to, which is the place that I've gotten to. I used to feel like, oh, I have to teach and I have to educate. And now, you know, we're so used to being laborers that we will go 99% of the way, not meeting people halfway. We will meet people most of the way to try to get them to learn certain things or try to give them certain knowledge. Folks got to start meeting us halfway, really 3/4 of the way, because we've done so much mental, emotional, intellectual labor that at some point folks are going to have to start coming in our direction, learning stuff for themselves, doing their own research, unpacking things themselves, instead of that work being done on our backs, if that makes sense. So, so it's radical for us to challenge that. Like, it's radical, you know, if somebody's like, oh, tell me about such and such, and for me to say no, I'm like, no, actually look it up for yourself. That's still a radical decision. So you don't have to feel this weight or this obligation to like, or like you're less radical by choosing, you know, by prioritizing yourself. That's a very radical thing to do.
Yeah, a lot of the time you don't see it as that, though. But yeah, no, I completely understand what you're saying. Wow, that's like, it just puts everything kind of into perspective. So thank you for that.
I mean, we don't see it as radical a lot of times too, because look at our conditioning. You know, there's certain things that are ingrained into us, like that we're supposed to do. Like, this is just a part of like your role. So it doesn't feel, you know, sometimes something as simple as doing something that you really want to do, doing self-care or, you know, community care, whatever, you doing those things can feel very like, oh, I'm not doing enough or whatever. But that's because we've been conditioned to feel that way. Like, we've been conditioned to feel like prioritizing ourselves isn't a major thing. Like, that's like, it doesn't count, basically. So it's hard. It's hard to not feel like guilt and, you know, feel some kind of way about doing it, but it is definitely radical to do it in a world that doesn't want us to do that. Like, this world does not want you as a young Black queer woman to prioritize yourself. That's not what, like, the world, that's not what this, you know, patriarchal system wants for you. So for you to do that is, you know, radical. It's a revolutionary act. So we just kind of have to look at, in our very existence, kind of in our day-to-day lives, we are doing this revolutionary radical stuff really just by existing. Because, you know, but if some people had their way, we would not. Like, we would be in hiding. We would not be being able to live our truth. So, you know, kind of seeing how it manifests on every level, as opposed to just looking at the education and kind of helping people learn stuff. Looking at it just by you choosing to do this podcast, or by you accepting certain things about yourself. That's a radical act of self-love and self-acceptance that is, you know, not like what we're conditioned to do. We're conditioned to work and nurture other people, but not invest that in ourselves.
Yeah, we could definitely talk about that too. And finally realizing that you have to put yourself first and love yourself first. That is very hard to do. I've definitely had a lot of experiences with that, particularly with, you know, ex-partners and people that I've been with, in those really codependent relationships. And by codependent, I mean, by them not doing well and you coming to the rescue and trying to fix it. And by that, I mean, fix, like do the work that they should be doing for themselves. And kind of getting a thrill. Yes, and it's a thrill, and it's like, wow, this person is going through so much, and I'm here, and I'm their ride or die, and all that good stuff, but bad stuff. Yeah, it gets codependent, It's not nurturing. It'll suck the life out of you. And those are all things I've had to deal with to my 21-year-old self. And kind of reflect and understand that I have to put myself first and really just be here for myself before I'm here for anyone else.
I mean, it's good that you're learning that now, because think about if you look at you know, just a lot of times, like if we look at the other like Black women in our families and stuff like that, or friends or whatever, we look at those who are older than us and the time that it took them to get to that point, if they're even there. Like, you know, a lot of them don't get to that place where they feel okay to prioritize themselves and they feel okay to like really focus on themselves, because it's so deeply ingrained. So we're really having to, there's like that that generational trauma that's ingrained, that we're having to break that cycle by saying, hey, no, actually, I'm not going to be your workhorse. No, actually, I'm not going to be your savior. I'm not going to do all this labor for you. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to be your mother. I'm not going to be, because we end up playing all these different types of roles for people, and that's what we're used to. So by rejecting that, it really is breaking a cycle that we've been subjected to for generations. And so that's a very, very radical thing to do. It's something that's very, very important. So for you to be in that place now, it really just, it helps to set the tone for, as you move forward and get older, like how you navigate your relationships with people and what you will and will not accept. But it's a beautiful thing that you're able to go through this process at 21 as opposed to 41, 51. I mean, that's really the reality for a lot of people. I mean, I still feel like better late than never, but look at the beauty of like, hey, look, I'm doing this now so that when you're 31 like me, you know, you can be, you know, surpass where I am now in terms of like my self-awareness and stuff like that, and prioritizing myself. So I think you can't take it lightly. It's something like, make sure that you take the time to really like give yourself props for like doing what you need to do, and like for really embracing yourself and doing it like in an unapologetic way. It's you can't really downplay, you know, the significance of that. Yeah, that's something I think as Black women we definitely do often, is like downplay our accomplishments, and like that is so me to sit here and not big up myself and just be like, yeah, I do that. This is my reality. I live against all of these oppressive systems every day, but I'm just built like that because I'm, you know, a Black woman, and that's what we're supposed to do. You know what I mean? So that gets difficult too, like actually, like even when you sit here and tell me like, wow, that's really great for you at 21, I'm like, yeah, like it's cool, you know, and that's a cycle too that I think I need to work on with myself, and accepting compliments, but not because someone else said them. I mean, of course, being appreciative that people appreciate me, but accepting them because I know that they're true. Yeah, like, but this all just comes from self-reflection, and I just take every small thing as a major thing. So even the fact that I can sit down here and consciously realize that that's something I need to work on, that's progress in itself. And admitting that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely. But admitting that, you know, I have to work on things, I feel like that's the first step in changing things. I always tell people that, because without admittance, you know, you can't get anything done. You don't even realize it's a problem. That's that first step. That's the first step, is admitting you have a problem. I mean, for those, well, I will say for my listeners, like, if you haven't realized it by now, you know, it's I think it's at this point kind of obvious. So like Marissa is in a similar field, pursuing a similar field to what I'm in professionally, and so it totally does not surprise me, because I do think, you know, if you want to be in the helping professions, whether you want to do social work, therapy, counseling, life coaching, whatever, like anything that's going to be nursing, just like something that's a helping profession that, you should do that work with yourself and have that level of self-awareness before you kind of like try to help facilitate that for other people. And that is the ongoing process. It's like continuing education, that just like you have to continue your education for licensure and stuff like that, you have to continue your education for yourself and for your self-awareness. So I think that to me, it seems like it's a good fit basically for you to be, for you to pursue the field that you're pursuing, because it takes that work. And so for you to be able to tell someone else, like, hey, I'm telling you to do this, but like I can say it because I've done the work. To me, that's been, for me, one of my most valuable assets is that I can truly empathize with people, because I'm like, look, I'm not telling you this because, just to say it and just because it's the thing to say. Like, no, I'm in therapy too. No, I deal with this too. Like it's, you can actually empathize with people. And we need more, more folks, especially more Black women, more Black queer folks and stuff in the helping professions anyway, because we need it. And so we need to be able to see people that look like us. So I think that it's really exciting, that that's something that you're pursuing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely love my field of study. Like, I have learned so much about, like what you said, empathy, being able to validate people, being able to self-reflect and know that you make mistakes and know that things have happened to you and you're consciously trying to work past them, and really not bringing your what you've been through to your clients also is super, super important, because you don't want to show bias, obviously, and that's just social work things. But also knowing how to empathize and understand what they're going through. I know you talked about being an empath. That was one of my favorite episodes. I definitely can relate. I feel everything at such like a high intensity of emotion, it's hard to deal with. But also knowing when you have to remove yourself in self-care. And one of my biggest things, if you're in a helping profession, I would definitely just recommend knowing that you even helping is doing a lot for them, and kind of taking that blame of, or maybe that guilt of what they're going through off of yourself, because you are helping your client or the person that you're working with go through their trauma. That's been really, really important for me, knowing that I'm making an impact. And that kind of goes back to what I said about like my civic duty of just being on this earth and existing for like other people, to help other people, and for a greater purpose and things like that.
No, I definitely agree. I think it's important to, for me, like I want to help people. It's very important to me, and I think that one of the biggest things that we can remind ourselves of is that we can do that, and we can still do that on our own terms. We can still do that, strive for balance and not, burn out. We don't have to sacrifice ourselves to do it. We can still like retain ourselves and, and still like make sure that we do the things that we want to do while also playing this role that we want to play in people's lives and really helping them. So, but I think that by you doing this work, the work that you're doing internally, because even when I was in, like part of me doing grad school was going to therapy, having to do therapy. Like we had a class that focused on just therapy and, you talking about your own experiences in therapy and stuff like that. But, I just think it's so important that you're doing that process now. But before, so what I wanted to do, which is not, I don't think it's something I've done with anybody before, but kind of to wrap up, I wanted to ask you if you, like, if there's anything that you could say to, okay, so you're 21 now. So if there's anything you could say to your 11-year-old self and your 31-year-old self, what would it be?
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
Like if it's like something that you want, like something that you kind of want to for your 11-year-old self, like, okay, what would you tell that little girl, like, okay, based on where you are now, and then what do you want to, kind of what's something that you're like, okay, well, 31-year-old me, I'm looking forward to this, or like, what type of woman do you see yourself being?
So just to give you like some background, I'm from Rochester, New York. So I'm from upstate New York. And I have been through a lot. I feel like my teenage years were some of the most difficult for me. I went through my parents' divorce. I went through different stuff with body dysmorphia, eating, trying to fit into society and fit into society as someone that I wasn't, and someone that I may never be, but learning to come to terms with that I am not like anyone else on this earth, and I'm special just because I'm me, would definitely be something that I would tell the 11-year-old Marissa Lynn, if I could go back and tell her something. I also would tell her that just being me is enough, because I always felt like I had to prove myself to my parents, to different people in my school. I really just feel like I kind of wasted might be a strong word. I'm trying to pick my words carefully. But it was very hard my younger days, just because I wanted to like fit in, and I wanted to be what everyone saw me to be, rather than just existing and knowing I was enough by doing that. So my 11-year-old self, I would definitely tell her those two things. Just exist, just be you, and be confident in who you are, and learn more about yourself. And, not take no for an answer when it comes to things relating to you and your self-growth.
Oh. No, I think that's awesome. I think it's always cool to kind of look back and see, kind of with hindsight, to just see like, okay, well, this is what I would tell that version of me. So for your 31-year-old self, I guess what about her? Because that's a grown woman.
31. It's just crazy because like 11 seems so far away and 31 seems further. And especially since I just turned 21, I'm like, oh my god. Even 22, I'm like, damn, like I'm getting up there. That's crazy.
Really?
But,
oh my god. Getting up there, girl.
But you know what though? I just feel like every moment, like I feel like I'm so just blessed. And like when I really tell you like my gratitude level, I have one of the highest I've probably met of people. Like I'm just so excited to be existing and happy and living. And like I said, I have been through triumphs. So like even being here, coming from like where I come from, like a lot of people don't make it to the place I am. A lot of people don't go to college.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't succeed in the way they want to because they're so caught up in different things relating to like the area that Rochester is and stuff like that. So I don't know, I think 31 I would just say keep reaching, and ideally I would want myself to be in a space of 31 I feel like is like my career should pretty much be settled, maybe look towards family stuff in the near future. But if I'm not there, to allow myself to be in a space that isn't exactly what I imagined and be okay with that. And just remember like where I came from and the struggles I've been through. I always want to be a helping person, so hopefully by 31 I'm doing all that I can for like this world and more. That would be ideal, but I don't know. a lot could happen in 10 years. Like, I'm just happy to live. I'm just happy to live in the now, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot can definitely happen in that time frame, but I think it's so like it's just kind of awesome to look for. It's actually, you know, that kind of look. What would you say to your future self? Is something that a mentor of mine. Well, my mentor, I only have one, but my mentor asked me when I first around the time that we first met, and it's so crazy because you know the things that I said when we met initially. It hasn't been quite 10 years yet, but, you know, kind of like, okay, 5 years from now, kind of what do you want to, and it really, you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised how it turns out. I think that even though there are a lot of things that have manifested in my life that I never would have imagined, I still feel like, you know, I'm where I'm supposed to be, even though it doesn't look necessarily how, it's like it does and it doesn't. In some ways it does look like how I thought it would, and in some ways it doesn't. So, but yeah, I definitely, I mean, it was awesome to be able to get you on the show, because it meant a lot to hear from you and to get your message. And, I mean, it's just one of those things that some of my friends, like, they're going to know who I'm talking about, because when I got your message, I was like, oh my God, you know, and I sent, I'd like screenshot to like my wife, my best friends, like, with the little crying emoji, like, oh my God. And then, so it was just really, it just really meant a lot to me. So I appreciate it, that you took the time to send it. I don't know if do you want folks to follow you on like social media or anything like that? Do you have anything you want to share, plug, or any of that?
Yeah, well, first I just wanted to say, like, I'm happy you're happy to have me, because I'm so ecstatic and thankful that, you know, you decided to have me on your show. Honestly, this outlet has, when I tell you, helped me in ways that are, like, I don't even really know how to explain. Like I said, on my free time, I listen to this podcast, and I'm like, yeah, like, someone gets it. And just having that representation and knowing that there's other people that are going through similar things as me in a space that I don't feel like I really have people that, you know, are. It's really empowering, and it kind of helps me go day by day, you know, just existing. But so little segue, if you feel like I have something I've said has resonated with you, you could follow me. I mostly check like Instagram the most, which would be at Low Ruz. Long story behind that, but that's what everyone in high school used to call me. They used to call me Ruz because my name's Marissa, and then like Riss goes with that. But and then somehow that turned into Ruz. But so that would be LOWRUZZ, and then that's my Instagram, and Twitter also would be the same handle.
All right, y'all. As usual, thank you so much for tuning in to Black Radical Queer Podcast. I'm so glad that you're taking the time to listen. And until next time, I'm out. Bye, y'all. Black Radical Queer Podcast is all about intersectionality and Black queer folks sharing our stories on our own terms. We navigate an array of identities, and BRQ is an outlet where we can see the spectrum of those identities reflected, explored, and celebrated. Black Radical Queer is a ManeHustle Media podcast hosted by Javia Nicole, produced and edited by Charmaine Johnson. Music is by Publicity. You can find us on social media by looking up Black Rad Queer. It's BLK RAD QWR. We are on Facebook as well as Instagram and Twitter. Same handle regardless, at Black Rad Queer. BLK RAD QWR. We also have a Facebook discussion group that's just called BRQ Discussion Group, and you can also listen wherever you get your podcasts. So we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, Google Play, you know, all those types of things. And we have, you know, our home base that's on Libsyn, so you can listen on there as well. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Make sure you come on back around next week to see what we have for you. And all right, y'all, I'm out.
ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.